Hi, I'm Ruth, and to celebrate National Baking Week, I'm going to show you how to bake President Caramelised Onion and Brie puff pastry wraps. For the pastry, the ingredients you will need are 250 grams of strong plain white flour, 250 grams of President slightly salted butter, the juice of half a lemon, and 5 to 6 tablespoons of cold water. For the filling, you will need 400 grams of sliced red onion, 25 grams of President slightly salted butter, 1 garlic clove finely chopped or crushed, 1 tablespoon of golden caster sugar, 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, and 100 grams of President Brie. I'm going to put these out of the way just for a moment, and we'll get on with making our pastry. You need to take your 250 grams of strong white flour and add it to the bowl of a food processor. Take the 250 grams of President slightly salted butter and cut it into 1 centimetre slices. You need to take the slices and add them to the bowl of the food processor on top of the flour. We're going to pulse the processor until the butter is broken up into small but still visible chunks. So you're going to take the flour and butter mixture and empty it into a large bowl. Make a well in the centre and add the juice of half a lemon. You'll then need to add 5 to 6 tablespoons of cold water to bring the pastry together. Start with just a couple of spoons. And begin to bring it together with a knife. The mixture is still a little dry, so it does need a few more spoonfuls. Once the pastry is very roughly together, you empty it out onto your work surface and bring it together with your hands. Gently squeezing it together to knead the pastry into one ball. Incorporate the dry mixture that's still on your work surface, so we're making use of all the ingredients. The butter's already started to soften, so the pastry is going to need to go back into the fridge to chill. Once it's nicely together like that, we need to wash our hands. Wrap the pastry in some cling film, nice and tightly so the air doesn't get to it. That needs to go into the fridge to chill, and we can get on with making our filling. To begin with, you need to melt the 25 grams of President slightly salted butter in a large frying pan. Once that's melted, add your 400 grams of sliced red onions to the pan. We're just going to soften these, so it just needs to be over a medium heat. Not too finely sliced, because we don't want them to break down into nothing. We still need to keep the slices. Once the onions are nicely softened, we're going to add the chopped or crushed garlic, caster sugar, and 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. Give that a good mix together. I'm going to turn up the heat so that the onions start to caramelise and the vinegar begins to dissolve. So once the onions have caramelised nicely and the majority of the vinegar has evaporated, you need to turn off the heat and transfer them to a bowl to cool. And set these to one side to cool till later. So once the pastry is chilled nicely in the fridge, we're going to get it back out again. So it's nice and chilled and the butter's firm, so we need to work fairly quickly and confidently. I'm going to start to roll out the pastry into a long rectangle. Flour the top of it to help it not stick to your rolling pin. You can already feel the butter starting to melt. Keep putting a little bit of flour onto the top and checking it's not stuck to the bottom. You're aiming for a long, thin rectangle, but it doesn't matter about it being rough around the edges. So once we've got a long, thin rectangle shape, we're going to fold the top down a third of the way and the bottom up over the top of it. Lifting it from the work surface, add a little bit more flour underneath and turn the pastry so that the folds are on either side, so a 90-degree angle. A little bit more flour on the top. So for the second time, we're going to roll it into a long, thin rectangle again. Again, a bit more flour as you go along, just to stop it sticking to the rolling pin too much. A bit more flour underneath. And fold it into thirds again. This is the second time we've folded it into thirds. And once again, turn it 90 degrees. So the folds are on either side. More flour underneath and a little bit on the top. Then I'm going to roll it out for the third and final time. You see the pastry getting much more neater and more refined. And so for the last time, we're going to fold it into thirds. We're then going to wrap that block of puff pastry in cling film and leave it to chill again in the fridge until the butter's gone nice and hard and it's rested. So begin to roll out your chilled puff pastry. Knead it into a large rectangle. Keep making sure your pastry is free on the work surface, and if not, add a little extra flour. The pastry should be nice and firm, so it will be a little tricky to roll. Keep making sure it's not sticking. Adjust your rolling pin if necessary. Once the pastry is into a nice rectangle, you can use a pizza cutter or a sharp knife to trim the edges. You can use your rolling pin as a guide. take away the excess pastry. If you need to move it, flip it over your rolling pin, just making sure it's not stuck, and divide it into 6. Take your caramelised onion filling that you prepared earlier and divide it between the 6, spreading it diagonally from corner to corner. So take your brie and you want to chop it into fairly small pieces and divide those between each wrap. For each wrap, you want to take opposite corners and fold them in and over. Squeeze them together lightly with your fingers. Then need to transfer these carefully to a lined baking tray. Three to a baking tray works just perfectly, and brush them lightly with a little milk. These then need to go into the oven at 180 for approximately 15 minutes. So the wraps are ready to come out of the oven. We can transfer them to a wire rack to cool. These can be served warm or cold, and there we have it, President Caramelised Onion and Brie Puff Pastry Wraps.